But let me start by saying that I'm equally blessed to be here and to be surrounded by such magnificent fellows and to be accepted by this wonderful community here at the GSD. And I've been here only 2 weeks now, and it has been quite humbling, I have to say. So while going through my portfolio, which I had to submit for the application, I've been working as a curator, as a critic, making exhibitions, doing all kinds of projects that involve a lot of people, and I'm not going to mention any of them, and I'm actually not going to talk about humans so much today. What I want to focus on is the other, everything but the human. I want to talk about that what was formerly known as nature. And I want to start with a project that I'm showing here. Is an exhibition which is still going on in the Dutch city of Leeuwarden, which still is the European cultural capital. And as part of that, I was asked to make an exhibition with a whole team of people. And in that, we try to imagine what the Netherlands could look like, can look like in the future, if we take nature into account, if we kind of try to re-root ourselves in the soil from which we grew. So it's an attempt. The exhibition is there. I don't think many of you will have a chance to go there. But just a glimpse here, one important part of it is that we allow visitors to take off their shoes, to climb down these stairs, and then you end up in the basement of a building where we recreated the Wadden Sea, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site in the Netherlands, in the north. It's an actual sea. But obviously it's under pressure. It's shrinking. There's mass tourism that is partly destroying it. They're drilling for oil there. So what we try to do here is to rehabilitate it, to celebrate that fantastic site, and also to give people an idea of maybe what nature will be like in the future, that it can only survive in artificial surroundings. And upon my arrival here, and I guess you also sit in cars and you look out of your window and you stare at the city, and this was upon my arrival here in Boston. And I had to think back on that exhibition and working with people in that part of the Netherlands that are so strongly attached to the soil still. And I was looking for natural elements. I was looking for a way out, but I found myself lost in a concrete jungle. And this feeling of being lost in architecture, in urban surroundings, is actually the topic of my inquiry here. And I came up with a name for it, and to illustrate it, I put up this picture of the marble quarry in Carrara in Italy. And at this point in time, we're literally decapitating mountains to build cities. To build, for example, here the medical school of Harvard, which was partly made from this very marble that you see here. So we're reshaping the environment. And architecture plays an important role in that. And I would like to call that we're living in the Archipocene. So this is the starting point for my stay here. I want to look into that. What does it mean? What is the impact that architecture and the construction industry have on our environment? And obviously this word derives from another word, namely the Anthropocene, which you're probably familiar with by now. What it comes down is that human life on this planet has a geological impact. So we are leaving irreversible traces on the surface of this planet. And a good example of that is Dubai, of course, in many ways. But you're probably familiar with this building in the background that is shaped like a sailboat. It's made from the same marble that I just showed you. And not only that, the sand that you see here on the beach is enriched with the marble from Carrara to make it look more white. So this is how far we got. So what I want to look at is this human layer that sits on top of what was formerly known as nature, which we could call the Anthropocene in this very bad drawing here by me. So I'm not the first one to claim this, but I think right now we are a geological force with our presence on this planet. We're leaving traces. We're leveling mountains. It's happening all around the world, but this is a striking example in Mecca, where literally whole hills have been removed to make place for new development. We're greening deserts. You're probably familiar with these images, but each time I look at them, I'm struck. Like, what are you thinking? Why would you want to build Las Vegas in one of the most arid parts of the US? So this is Las Vegas. And we're making land. We went on this bus tour of Boston, and I think 3/4 of that tour, we were actually on invented land, on newly created land, reclaimed land. It's magical, but it's also highly disturbing. So we're wrapping the world with architecture, with plastic in this case. These are the greenhouses in the south of Spain. And where is this taking us? Is this the end of nature, as I was suggesting? Since everything has been affected by human presence? Is it maybe even the end of humanity? Is it that catastrophic? You're probably familiar with these stones that they put up in Japan to warn people not to build below a certain line in case a tsunami would hit again. And obviously, they weren't paying attention. So whole cities were swallowed by the tidal wave. And so they built a new stone to commemorate the last tsunami. So, or to have an even more dystopian worldview, is this the end of the world? Will everything fall apart? Is there no way back? If you look at the media, you kind of start believing it, right? So this was recently in the New Yorker, the world is running out of sand. We knew about deforestation, but even sand, I mean, that's so omnipresent. How can we run out of sand? And sand obviously is used to make concrete, and cement, as is stated here in the LA Times, is producing 5 to 10% of total CO2 emissions worldwide. There's even a name for this layer, this artificial layer that we've wrapped around the world, coined by some scientists. It's the technosphere. And it consists of all these things that you see listed here. And I'm completely lost when I look at these figures. They don't say anything to me. But the bottom line is that we're in problems, in deep problems. We're lost in the mesh, so to speak. So you cannot longer distinguish between what's natural, what's artificial, what's human, what's non-human. Everything is kind of colliding and blurring. And architecture is not outside of that. And architects neither. It's not something that you can observe and you can say, I'm coming to the rescue, I'm gonna solve this. I think in a way we're all complicit in this. So maybe architecture is even at the core of it for its physicality, but also for its symbolic value, that it represents capital and many other things. So I'm asking myself, should we stop building? Should we stop designing? No more architecture? Should we draw a strict boundary between what's already there and what's left of what was formerly known as nature? Or should we just, go beyond it and accept that in the future we will be having plastic trees? What's wrong with plastic trees if they have the same qualities and characteristics as actual trees? Why can't buildings be trees? So I was a bit cynical. So let me take one step back and take you to my hometown of Amsterdam. and find some reason there. This is my street. I live in the building you see in the left-hand side. So we have no plastic trees there. And I care very much about living organisms. So I'm looking out onto the zoo of Amsterdam, which has some of the oldest trees in the city. At the same time, the name Amsterdam refers to human interference in nature. We built a dam in the river Amstel, which blocked the river from flowing, which enabled our forefathers to start a city there. So it's already embedded in the name. And you probably know that large parts of the Netherlands are built below sea level. So Holland, the hollow land, the Netherlands, it's true. On a massive scale, we've reclaimed land, we've put up massive dikes. Some parts are as low as 7 meters, 21 feet below sea level, with sea levels rising. So I live in a completely artificial environment. And this is no Photoshop, right? This is an actual scene that you can experience when you drive down the highway. And we took our ingenuity to this part of the world. As you probably know, New York was named New Amsterdam after the Dutch arrived. And look at what we ended up with in the end. And it could have been so different. There was so much already there that we could have learned from. How the indigenous people back then, how they organized themselves, even from an urbanist or from an architectural perspective, using materials that were lightweight, that were biodegradable, that were locally sourced, etc. But we ignored it. So this is where we are now. And there doesn't seem to be an end to it. It keeps on sprawling, it keeps on growing. This apparently is the boundary of Las Vegas today, but as you can see in the bottom left corner, there's already new construction on the way. And if you also consider this, it's from the Census Bureau, that in a matter of 40 years, the average size of an American home has almost doubled and keeps growing. And also, like, I'm upon my arrival, I've been reading in the news, and I found out about these plans, like a $1 trillion investment plan for to upgrade infrastructure here. So there will be a huge pressure on the environment in the US. So is it only a disaster? Is there no way back? Are all roads leading towards what already happened in the past? Will there be another collapse, not of modernism, but postmodernism or post-humanism? I don't think so. In the end, I'm positive. I believe in something I would like to call productive dystopia. I'm one of the people behind an online platform called Failed Architecture, and we really like to learn from failures or kind of rehabilitate buildings that are misrepresented or wrongly perceived as failures, such as Pruitt-Igoe. So I believe in the ability to have a restart. So this is the site of Pruitt-Igoe, where currently there are trees that are being cut down. There will be a new development, but I mean, with the downfall of Pruitt-Igoe, there was also a space opened up for renewal and for a new future. This is actually around the corner from here in Alston, where Harvard is active as a developer, making an entirely new neighborhood. I think there is an opportunity there, even for Harvard and for those that are involved, to really rethink what architecture can be in that environment, so close to the river and close to all kinds of communities around it. I think there's also possibility to have architecture that is regenerative. So this is a great example, I think, of Assemble that are based in London that used the rubble and the dust from an abandoned site to make an actual new structure that was used for temporary events. And I think it's also an opportunity now to reunite. this is obviously the protest against the Dakota X pipeline that brought people together using the same teepees or the traditional houses to kind of show that there's an alternative. And keeping in mind that the average lifespan of buildings keeps decreasing, and given the fact that a lot of buildings will only survive for a few decades, but that they will remain a source of material, I think there's a whole world to explore. So that's why I'm here, and that's what I want to learn from you as a non-architect, as a failed architect. That's where you come in. So, for example, what I want to look into is like, what are buildings made from? Like down to the smallest details. What kind of materials? Where do they come from? So also geographically, can we trace them back to their original place? And can we rethink the supply chain of materials? Can we look more closely at locally sourced materials? I want to look at projects that kind of help us to understand it. So this is Lara Almarsegui, who put the building materials of the space she was showing inside that space. So it gives you an understanding of what it takes to actually create that environment. I want to look at materials or products that are showing alternative ways of building, such as this biodegradable concrete that was developed by students in London. And I want to look at practices. These are people from Brussels that I really admire. Rotor, you might know them from their Venice Biennale contribution a few years ago, where they put pieces from demolished buildings on the wall as if they were art pieces, showing the wear and tear and pointing out the beauty of decay. And they recently started a new branch of their company, which is called Deconstruction. That is what they do. So they salvage materials, they build a huge database and a warehouse, and you can go online and find materials and get it. So it's repurposed or reused materials in the most radical sense. And I want to go to places to learn and to understand, and not only look at architecture, but also look at natural phenomena like this beaver dam. Like, how is that being constructed? How do beavers, where do they find their materials? How do they reuse materials? And I want to start right here, because I think this is a fascinating place that has a lot of promise to it. So there's the Zero House just across the park here that apparently is autarkic, and I really want to dive into that and see whether that is actually true, what can be learned from it, and what might be open for improvement. And I want to start with you. So I'm inviting all of you to advise me, to help me, to join me in finding these examples, finding some answers to some of the questions that I'm posing here. Because I think we're all in the same mess in a way. This is a scene that we encountered on our very first day when some of you were moving into your dorms here. And this is just the result of one day of unpacking new interior items and put outside on big piles of waste. So what can we do with that waste? How can we prevent ourselves from creating the waste in the beginning? So please join me. I started this little Instagram thing where I'm collecting examples, things that fascinate me, things that annoy me. Please leave comments or make suggestions. So thank you.